The security guard looked at me like I'd just crawled out from under a rock. His eyes swept from my dusty cargo pants to my travel-worn boots, and I could practically see him calculating my net worth at about $15 and some pocket lint. He stepped forward, blocking my path to the Azure Sovereign's main entrance with all the authority of someone who'd been doing this job for exactly 3 days. He didn't ask for my name, he didn't check the guest list. He just pointed a thick finger toward a narrow, rocky path disappearing around the side of the cliff. "Service entrance," he sneered. "Deliveries and day laborers in the back. Before we see how bad this gets, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." I walked down that rocky path, the gravel crunching under my boots like the sound of grinding teeth. The service entrance of the Azure Sovereign isn't glamorous. It's a loading dock smelling of diesel fumes, damp cardboard, and the high-stress sweat of catering staff. I knew every inch of this concrete bay, because I was the one who signed off on the blueprints 3 years ago. But today, I wasn't the architect or the owner. I was just the embarrassing older sister. Chloe was waiting for me by the floral refrigeration units. She looked like a curated social media feed come to life. Her hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection that couldn't possibly move in the coastal breeze. When she saw me, her face didn't light up with relief or love. It crumpled with aesthetic offense. "You cannot be serious," she hissed, her eyes scanning my cargo pants like they were a crime scene. "I told you the vibe was coastal luxury, not lost hiker. The Sterlings are here, Alexandra. Cynthia Sterling is terrifying. If she sees you looking like this, she'll think we're trash." I didn't apologize. I didn't explain that my clothes were made of technical fabric that cost more than her bridesmaids' dresses. I just looked at her. "So I'm not attending the ceremony?" Chloe let out a sharp, nervous laugh. "Attend? Alex, look at you. You're visual pollution. You don't fit the aesthetic. Cynthia is obsessed with lineage and presentation. We can't risk you ruining the tableau." Visual pollution. The term was efficient, I'll give her that. It categorized me not as a person, but as a stain on a lens. "But," she continued, pivoting immediately from insult to demand, "we are desperate. The florist is short-staffed and the arch for the ceremony is huge. Since you're here, and you're not going to be seen by the guests, you can help prep the roses. Make yourself useful. It's the least you can do since you didn't buy a gift." I stood there, watching her manicured hands flutter. A rational person, a person who runs a multi-million-dollar hospitality empire, would have laughed, turned around, and had security escort her off the property. But I didn't. I reached out and took the pair of heavy gardening gloves she was thrusting at me. There is a specific kind of psychological trap that successful women from toxic families fall into. It's the trap of normalized cruelty. You spend your entire childhood being the fixer, the one who absorbs the chaos so the golden child can shine. You learn early on that your currency in the family is utility, not humanity. Even when you escape, even when you build a kingdom of your own, that old programming runs deep in the background code. You think that if you just solve one more crisis, if you just take one more hit for the team, maybe this time the ledger will balance out, and they'll finally value you. It's a lie, of course. The ledger never balances, it just gets heavier. I pulled on the gloves. They were stiff and smelled of fertilizer. I wasn't accepting this role because I was weak. I was accepting it because I needed to see exactly how far this rot went. I needed data, and the best place to gather intelligence isn't from the VIP table. It's from the floor, where people stop pretending. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "Point me to the flowers." Chloe didn't say thank you. She just checked her reflection in the glass door of the fridge, smoothed her dress, and pointed toward the back lot. "Stay out of sight," she ordered. "And try not to sweat." I walked past her, heading into the heat. I wasn't a sister anymore. I was a spy in my own house. I hauled the steel frame of the floral arch across the gravel. It weighed about 50 pounds, but with the wet floral foam and hundreds of white roses attached, it felt like I was dragging a dead body. The California sun was beating down on the back of my neck, turning the service lot into a convection oven. A thorn snagged the sleeve of my tactical shirt, scratching a long, thin line of red across my forearm. I didn't stop to check it. I just kept pulling. I was positioning the third arch near the cliff edge when I heard the click of heels on pavement, a sound that was completely out of place in a loading zone. Cynthia Sterling didn't walk, she patrolled. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that cost more than the average American car, and she looked at the ocean view with the critical eye of someone deciding whether or not to fire nature for underperformance. Chloe was trailing behind her, carrying a shade umbrella like a terrified lady in waiting. "Careful with those," Cynthia snapped. "Not at me, but at the air in my general direction. Those roses are imported. If you bruise them, I'm docking the florist's pay." She didn't look at my face. She looked at the flowers. To her, I was just the biological machinery required to move the decor from point A to point B. I paused, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my glove. The urge to speak, to introduce myself as the woman who owned the ground she was standing on, was a physical ache in my chest, but I swallowed it. I needed to see the full picture. "You really can't get good help these days," Cynthia muttered to Chloe, loud enough for me to hear. "It's all so slow. So clumsy. I told you we should have brought our own people from the estate, instead of relying on the resort's budget staff. It's cheap labor. And it shows." Chloe laughed a brittle, desperate sound. "I know, Cynthia. I'm so sorry. I'll make sure they speed it up." They walked away, discussing the champagne vintage as if I were a piece of gardening equipment. I watched them go, my blood boiling hotter than the afternoon sun. Cheap labor, that was the assessment. Not human. Not skilled. Just a cost to be minimized. I reached for 2 5-gallon buckets of water to anchor the arch. They were heavy, sloshing over the sides and soaking my boots. I gritted my teeth and lifted, straining my back. Suddenly, the weight vanished. I looked up to see a pair of hands gripping the handles next to mine. It was the groom. Justin. He was wearing a tuxedo shirt with the collar unbuttoned, and he looked exhausted. "Let me get that," he said. His voice wasn't commanding like his mother's, it was apologetic. I tried to pull the buckets back. "Sir, you shouldn't be back here, you'll ruin your shoes." He ignored me and hoisted the buckets easily, carrying them to the base of the arch. He set them down and wiped his hands on his expensive trousers without a second thought. Then he looked at me, actually looked at me, right in the eyes. "I'm sorry about my mother," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry about all of this." I froze. He didn't know who I was. He thought I was just a florist's assistant, a random employee sweating in the dirt. And he was apologizing to me. "It's a beautiful wedding," I said, testing him. He let out a short, bitter laugh. "It's a circus. A $2 million circus. I wanted to elope in the mountains. Just Chloe and me. But my mother." He trailed off, looking at the massive floral display with genuine distaste. "My mother thinks affection is something you buy tickets to." He looked trapped. I recognized that look because I used to see it in the mirror every morning. This wasn't a man enjoying his coronation. This was a hostage. "Don't let them work you too hard," he told me. "Seriously. If they give you trouble, tell them." Justin said to back off. He turned and walked back toward the venue, head down, like a man walking to the gallows. I stood there, the ocean wind drying the sweat on my neck. This complicated things. The narrative in my head had been simple. The Sterlings were monsters. And my sister was a sellout. I was ready to burn it all down. But Justin wasn't a monster. He was decent. He was kind to the help when no one was watching. He was the only innocent thing in this entire garden. And I realized, with a sinking feeling, that when I finally pulled the trigger on this trap, he was going to get caught in the crossfire. I waited until the florist was distracted by a wilting hydrangea, then I slipped away. I didn't head for the guest areas. I went to a service corridor behind the kitchen, pressed my thumb against a nondescript panel next to a linen closet, and waited for the green light. The wall slid open. The director's suite isn't listed on the floor plan. It's a soundproof, climate-controlled command center, hidden in the rock face, designed for high-profile guests who need absolute security, or for the owner when she needs to watch her kingdom without being seen. The door sealed behind me, cutting off the noise of the party and the smell of diesel. I didn't sit down. I walked straight to the main terminal, and logged into the Azure Sovereign's internal financial system. My hands were still dirty from the garden, leaving smudges on the pristine keyboard, but I didn't care. I needed to see the numbers. I pulled up the event folio. Wedding of Justin Sterling and Chloe Vance. The screen blinked back at me, a wall of angry red text. Total outstanding balance, $98,500. Payment status, failed. Attempt 1, declined. Attempt 2, declined. Attempt 3, declined. They hadn't paid a dime. Not the deposit, not the catering, not the venue fee. They had been stalling my finance department for weeks with promises of wire transfers and banking errors. I opened a second window and ran a deep dive credit check on Richard and Cynthia Sterling. It's a tool we use for high rollers to ensure they're good for their credit lines. The report generated in seconds, and it was a bloodbath. Foreclosure notices on the Connecticut estate. Repossession orders for 3 vehicles. A mountain of lawsuits from unpaid contractors. Total estimated debt, $2.5 million. They weren't just cash poor, they were insolvent, they were drowning. I leaned back against the desk, staring at the monitors that displayed the live feed from the terrace. On screen, Cynthia Sterling was currently screaming at a waiter for pouring the wrong vintage of champagne. She looked imperious, untouchable, radiating the kind of confidence that usually comes with a 9-figure trust fund. And suddenly, the math of her cruelty finally added up. There is a specific psychological phenomenon, often seen in the collapsing upper class. I call it the delusion of power of the empty wallet. When you possess actual wealth, you don't need to scream at waiters to prove you're important. Your existence is proof enough. But when the money vanishes, when the foundation of your identity rots away, the ego goes into survival mode. You treat being served as the last remaining evidence of your superiority. You abuse the staff not because you are powerful, but because they are the only people left on earth you are legally allowed to look down on. Cynthia wasn't acting like a queen because she owned the world. She was acting like a queen because if she stopped the performance for even 1 second, the reality of her bankruptcy would crush her. Her arrogance wasn't a personality trait. It was a structural load-bearing wall, holding up a condemned building. I watched her take a sip of wine she couldn't afford, poured by a waiter she was planning to stiff. She was laughing now, gesturing with a diamond hand that was likely mortgaged to the hilt. It was pathetic. It was tragic. But it was also dangerous, because people with nothing left to lose are capable of anything. And right now, my sister, my foolish, shallow, desperate sister, was the only asset they had left to liquidate. I left the cool, sterilized air of the director's suite and stepped back into the humidity of the service corridor. I pulled the heavy gardening gloves back onto my hands. They were damp with sweat and dirt, a stark contrast to the fiber optic cables and forensic accounting software I had just been using. But that was the point. To catch a predator, you have to look like prey. I made my way back to the floral prep area behind the main tent. The reception was about to start, and the staff was in a frenzy, moving centerpieces and lighting candles. I grabbed a crate of surplus greenery and moved toward the secluded alcove, where the VIPs often took their smoke breaks. I didn't have to wait long. Cynthia Sterling was there, hidden behind a wall of jasmine, aggressively reapplying her lipstick. Her husband, Richard, was pacing the small enclosure, looking like a man whose lifeline was fraying. "Keep your voice down, Richard," Cynthia hissed, snapping her compact shut. "You look desperate. Desperation smells like blood to these people." "We are desperate, Cynthia," Richard whispered, his voice trembling. The bank called again. "If we don't wire the arrears by Monday, they're seizing the cars. We don't have the liquidity. We don't even have the cash to tip the valet." I stood perfectly still, on the other side of the jasmine, adjusting a fern leaf with surgical precision. To them, I was just background noise, the rustle of leaves, the movement of a servant. "Stop panicking," Cynthia said, her voice dropping to a low, cold register. "We just need to get through the ceremony. Once Justin and that girl sign the marriage license, the financial bind is legal. We're connected." "It's not enough," Richard argued. "Her parents aren't billionaires. They're upper middle class at best. They have assets, Richard. The house in Santa Barbara, the retirement accounts." Cynthia took a sip from her glass. I've already spoken to the lawyer. As soon as the ink is dry, we file the lawsuit. Lawsuit? Richard sounded confused. Breach of contract, she said simply. We claim her family promised to cover the entire cost of this wedding verbally. A verbal contract is binding if you have witnesses. And I'll make sure we have witnesses. We claim financial damages for the stress and the loans we took out to cover their share. We sue for $3 million. Richard stopped pacing. That's extortion. It's a settlement strategy, Cynthia corrected. They won't go to court. They're too obsessed with their reputation. They'll liquidate the house and the retirement funds to settle quietly and keep the scandal away from their precious Chloe. We take the settlement, pay off the mortgages, and we're back in the black by Christmas. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the coastal breeze. This wasn't just snobbery. It wasn't just a broke family trying to save face. This was a calculated, predatory extraction. They weren't welcoming my sister into their family. They were harvesting her. They planned to strip my parents, my hardworking, decent, retirement-ready parents of everything they owned, using the legal system as a crowbar. My hand moved to the pocket of my cargo pants. I tapped the screen of my phone, engaging the voice recorder app I'd prepped earlier. Are you sure? Richard asked weakly. It seems extreme. Do you want to live in a condo, Richard? Do you want to fly commercial? Cynthia snapped. Because that is the alternative. We are surviving. And if that little social climber's family has to be the collateral damage, so be it. She's desperate to be a Sterling. Let her pay the admission fee. I watched the audio waveforms spike on my screen, capturing every syllable of their conspiracy. Evidence secured. The admission fee. I stopped the recording and uploaded the file directly to the cloud server, linked to the ballroom's audio-visual system. I looked at the roses in my crate. They were beautiful, white, and pristine, just like the lie my sister was living. Cynthia Sterling thought she was the predator in this garden. She thought she was the only one with teeth. She didn't know she was standing in my zoo. I peeled off the gloves for the last time and dropped them into the dirt. The time for hiding was over. I changed back into my own clothes in the staff locker room, trading the sweaty tactical gear for a silk blouse and trousers I kept in my office for board meetings. I didn't put on jewelry. I didn't fix my hair. The power I was about to wield didn't require ornamentation. When I entered the grand ballroom, the reception was in full swing. It was a masterpiece of surface-level perfection. The band was playing a soft jazz standard, the champagne was flowing, and the guests were admiring the view, completely unaware that the hosts were financially radioactive. I saw Sean, my resort director, standing by the entrance. He looked pale. He was holding a leather folio, the bill. I walked up to him. "Give it to me," I said. "Miss Alexandra," he started, looking relieved and terrified at the same time. "They're refusing to speak to me. Mrs. Sterling threatened to have me fired." I took the folio from his hands. "She can't fire you, Sean. But I can fire her as a guest." I walked toward the head table. The room seemed to quiet down as I moved, a ripple of unease spreading through the crowd. Maybe it was the way I walked, not like a florist, but like a CEO. Or maybe it was just the energy of imminent destruction. Cynthia Sterling saw me coming. She put down her wine glass and glared. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "Get back to the kitchen. You're ruining the aesthetic." I ignored her and placed the folio on the table, right between her plate of untouched salmon and her empty wine glass. "We need to settle the bill, Cynthia. Now." She laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Excuse me? You're the help. Go find someone who matters." I opened the folio. The total stared up at us. $98,500. "The credit card on file has been declined," I said, my voice calm but carrying in the sudden silence of the room. 4 times. "The bank says the account has been closed due to insolvency." The music stopped. The chatter died. Every eye in the room turned to the head table. Cynthia stood up, her face flushing a deep, ugly red. "How dare you? I will have your job for this. Where is the manager? Where is the owner?" "I demand to speak to the owner immediately." "I am the owner," I said. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Chloe gasped. Justin looked at me, his eyes widening in realization. Richard Sterling looked like he was having a stroke. I'm Alexandra Vance, I continued. I own the Azure Sovereign. I own the land you're standing on, the wine you're drinking, and the flowers you forced me to arrange. And I know you can't pay for any of it. You're lying, Cynthia shrieked, her composure shattering. You're a gardener. A nobody. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Suddenly, Cynthia's voice boomed over the ballroom speakers, clear and undeniable. As soon as the ink is dry, we file the lawsuit. Breach of contract. We sue for $3 million. The recording continued, playing the entire conversation I'd witnessed in the garden. The guests listened in horrified silence, as Cynthia detailed her plan to sue Chloe's parents, to liquidate their retirement, to destroy them for cash. She's desperate to be a Sterling. Let her pay the admission fee. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. I looked at Chloe. She was staring at Cynthia, her face a mask of pure shock. For the first time in her life, the golden child was seeing the tarnish. Get out, I said to the Sterlings. Get off my property. Before I call the police and have you arrested for attempted fraud and theft of services. Cynthia looked around the room, desperate for an ally, for someone to save her. But the guests were turning away. The illusion was gone. The empty wallet was exposed. Richard grabbed her arm. Cynthia, let's go, please. They scrambled toward the exit, their dignity left in tatters on the ballroom floor. The security team, the same guards who had stopped me earlier, escorted them out, not with reverence, but with the firm grip reserved for trespassers. I turned to Justin. He was standing alone, looking at the space where his parents had been. I'm sorry, I said. He looked at me, then at Chloe, and then at the empty door. Don't be, he said, his voice shaking but clear. You just saved my life. The security team didn't need instructions. They escorted Richard and Cynthia Sterling to the main gate, loading them into a taxi like expired produce. Justin didn't watch them go. He walked out the front entrance, tie undone, finally breathing air that wasn't recycled through his mother's expectations. He had nothing but the clothes on his back, and he looked lighter than he had all day. That left Chloe. My sister stood by the ruined floral arch, the white roses wilting in the evening heat. The golden child facade had cracked. She wasn't the future Mrs. Sterling anymore. She was just a girl who had sold her family for a ticket to a show that had been cancelled. I thought I was securing our future, she whispered, her voice cracking. I thought if I fit their aesthetic, I would be safe. You weren't securing a future, Chloe. You were digging a grave for Mom and Dad's retirement. She looked at me, tears cutting tracks through her foundation. I'm so sorry, Alex. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't need your apology, I said, my tone even. I need your labor. She blinked. What? You want to understand what it means to build something real? You start tomorrow. 6 in the morning. Housekeeping. You're going to scrub the floors you wanted to walk on. You're going to learn the value of the people you treated, like visual pollution. She didn't argue. She didn't complain. She just nodded, and for the first time in 26 years, I saw my sister. Not the reflection of who she wanted to be. The next morning, I sat in the director's suite and drafted a new company-wide directive. It was the Staff Protection Protocol. It gave every employee, from the gardeners to the dishwashers, the absolute right to refuse service to abusive guests without fear of termination. It established a legal fund for staff, targeted by entitled clients. Real justice isn't just about cutting down the weeds. It's about planting something that can survive the winter. The Sterlings were gone. But the system that created them, the idea that money buys the right to cruelty, was still out there. My victory wasn't the public humiliation of a few con artists. It was ensuring that in my kingdom, dignity is the only currency that matters. I looked out the window at the gardens below. Chloe was there, pushing a linen cart, her hair tied back, sweating in the sun. She looked tired. She looked real. And the view had never been better. If you believe that true worth comes from how you treat others, not what you own, hit that like button and share this story. Let's remind the world who really holds the power.